770 WGTK gives you Let's Talk with Dr. Stan Frager. From relationship problems to family feuds, he's got all the advice and expert help you'll need. Now, here's Dr. Stan Frager.
Hey, Dr. Stan will be back next week. You're listening to Dr. Eli Karam. This is the second hour of Let's Talk. We had a great first hour and more to come, talking about all things relational and giving you some information on what to do. No one starts in a relationship thinking they're not going to be able to have children, probably. They might choose that or not to have children. Most people think they are at least going to have the option. What happens, though, if you are in a relationship, whether married or not, committed, and you cannot get pregnant? This happens to a lot of couples. It's something they suffer with in private, and tonight we're going to give you some help with that. I have joining me in studio Laura Wagner. Laura Wagner is a licensed marriage and family therapist, LMFT, like myself, and a certified life coach practicing in Louisville, and she specializes in, among other things, which she'll tell us about in the hour. She works a lot with couples with fertility issues and adoptive families. Laura has an amazing website that I always say, check it out and you'll learn a lot about Laura. It's very captures who she is, and you can find out about that, read her blog, and communicate directly with her, our guest, Laura Wagner, at laurawagner.com, and that's LAURA-WAGNER.com. More on that later. Welcome, Laura.
Hey, great to be here, Eli.
Great. Let's walk our couples through. So again, this is a private thing that a lot of couples struggle with. Let's just imagine we're in a relationship, we've been trying to conceive, it's not happening, I'm starting to think something is wrong. Mm-hmm. How do I deal with that myself, much less tell my partner about that?
Well, and like you said, no one thinks that you don't go in unless you've had some prior knowledge, when you were younger, that there may be some issues ahead for you. So when that does occur, that you get that information that you're having some difficulties, or you sense you are, it's a feeling of being blindsided, I think. And it's a conversation I think you begin having with yourself in terms of some thinking you need to do about how you coordinate your medical care. That's a big issue, but also how you coordinate caring for yourself through this. Who's going to help you? It's a certain kind of, I guess, when you first land in the spot of thinking you may have some trouble having children or not being able to have children, you're in a place where you're just not quite sure if you need some kind of help with a professional like one of us, or if you can go it alone. It's a certain kind of grief, but you're not quite sure what you're grieving yet, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Right, or you're not sure what's wrong, and a lot of people say, well, if you start talking to your partner, we just haven't tried long enough yet, or it's going to happen, or you're not timing your cycle right, or things like this. So, before we give some more tips, let's just go over some basic definitions of what infertility is. Infertility is usually defined as the inability to get pregnant after a year of unprotected sex. So, according to statistics collected by the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, 6.1 million women between the ages of 15 to 44 have an impaired ability to have children, and 2.1 million married couples are experiencing infertility. This study also found that 9.2 million women had made use of some infertility services at some point in their life, and we'll talk about that. And there's a difference also between primary infertility, and that refers to women who have never achieved a pregnancy, and then secondary infertility. And this is also confusing for couples. We've had a child once. What's wrong now? We can't have our second. And that's exactly what secondary infertility refers to: women who have achieved pregnancy and given birth in the past, but now are having difficulty conceiving. So this idea that it is something when couples start having problems, and it's not a decision, Laura, right, you can make on your own. And how do you get your partner on board with exploring options as far as fertility treatments, or at least getting information? Because that's not something, as a woman, you'd want to go into by yourself.
Exactly. And I usually share, almost always share with my clients, one reason I do this work. I'm blessed because I'm able to do it from a clinical perspective, but I also have a personal journey that I took through this with my own family. My husband and I, our issue was secondary infertility. I carried our 11-year-old daughter to term. Very easy to get pregnant a couple months after we decided, hey, let's have a baby. We had a baby 9 months later, a big 9-pound baby girl. And so as life unfolded, we decided we wanted to have another child. And that is when I got to that place where a lot of my clients are, where I was blindsided. In my case, it was a miscarriage. And secondary infertility, often that can be the case, is that for me, I could very easily get pregnant, but I could not sustain a pregnancy past 12 weeks. So it was a conversation that I began with my husband. You're in shock first, I think. The two of you wonder, how do we navigate this? Is it me? Is it you? That sort of thing. And to begin to talk to each other just about the steps that you want to take to move forward with it. And a lot of that, there are financial issues to consider. There are issues that may not come up for a while in terms of, well, how far do we go with this journey? Because it can be step by step a lot of times. Oh, yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned that, too. And you're right. People just think this is a woman problem. Well, we define it when we're working with marriage and family therapists or working with couples like this. It is a couple problem. And a lot of times, too, another myth is that it's just the woman that can't get pregnant. We know a lot of time there's male factor infertility. Whereas too low of a sperm count, or something is wrong with the motility or the number. And we're going to head to a break. We're going to talk more about that. But we are talking about couples struggling with fertility issues on Let's Talk. I got Laura Wagner in the studio with me, Dr. Eli Karam. Please give us a call, 571-0970.
You found Let's Talk with Dr. Stan Frager. Dr. Stan Frager is standing by to give you insight on issues that matter most to you. Call now, 571-0970.
Hey, you're listening to Eli Karam, back with Laura Wagner in studio. We're talking about couples struggling with fertility issues. Before the break, Laura, we were talking about just kind of struggling with yourself and getting your partner on board, and really, to do that, also, you need good psychoeducation. If I'm a couple and I have my partner on board and we want to explore, I guess, medically first, how to deal with this, where should they go?
Yeah, and that's usually where people start. Most women, most couples, if they're involved in a relationship, they're going to be starting this journey likely with an OBGYN, and that's probably where they're going to find out, over time, if there's issues, what they seem to be. And then there's a point in that care where oftentimes the OBGYN will start to see that, I guess, the term would be you sort of hit some walls in terms of treatment. And if time goes by and certain issues keep cropping up, then they refer you on to find a reproductive endocrinologist. Or as we in the infertility world, we everything's acronyms. You go see an RE, reproductive endocrinologist, and that is a specialty field where basically it's an infertility doctor, and that's what a lot of people would call an RE. And you get into some very specific plans about how you will try to have a pregnancy, sustain a pregnancy, all sorts of things.
And REs, they're going to give you lots of information, some more than you ever knew about the reproductive technology, assisted reproductive technology in yourself and your body and your partner's body. But they don't do a great job, or at least in my experience, in the relational piece, the emotional piece that has to happen between committed partners if you're going through this journey. So what is normal in terms of feelings or emotions around these issues, both for both the woman and the man, Laura? I mean, some people, they can think, they don't know how to react. They don't know what's being too sensitive, what's not. So normalize that for our listeners out there, or what you go through as far as the emotional piece when you're starting to explore these options in this journey.
Well, and oftentimes when I'm seeing, whether it's an individual or a couple, and they'll say, what am I supposed to feel, or I'm feeling this way, is that normal? And I'll say, everything's normal when you're going through something like this. It's such an individualized experience. And some people feel a sense of loss and grief, even if maybe they haven't had a miscarriage like some people with secondary infertility would, but you go through that cycle each month if you're doing, in vitros or IUIs and all that, and you're waiting and hoping this is it, this is the time. And then you're not pregnant. So there's a sense of loss, and your family's wondering why, what's happening, that sort of thing. So there's that. There's a sense of frustration. There might be more arguments between you and your partner because, maybe your partner, oftentimes the husband may not know how to come to you and help you through this part of your all's experience together, because if he says the right thing is the wrong thing, do I say too much? Do I approach? Does she need physical touch? Does she need space? So everybody's kind of in their own head, and it's a time, I think, in a relationship with a marriage where your communication changes a lot. It has to. You're on a new kind of journey together that you didn't plan for when you stood up in front of all those people.
You're right. It's
lived
not,
a life together.
It's not a normalized step on the family life cycle, as we said earlier. Nobody thinks they're going to hit this step, and therefore, you probably haven't prepped for it in the beginning. You can have all the best medical intervention and advice there is, but if you don't know how to talk about it with your partner, you don't know that some of these emotions are normal. You don't know about this roller coaster, and that's when people like you and me, marriage and family therapist, can come in. What would a marriage and family therapist help a couple going through this do as far as normalizing this emotional roller coaster and all these hurdles that a couple has to go over?
Well, oftentimes when people come in to see me, whether it's an individual, and then it's usually a female, the wife, and she may bring her husband into the fold at some point, but oftentimes I still get couples that come in together. And what they really need to do at first is, they need to share their story with me. I think they have their story together, how they walk through their days together, but to be able to offer that up to someone that can listen to them in a different way and, here's what's going on and can see the patterns that they've gotten into, and affirm for them that everything that they're walking through, all the difficulties, all the challenges, that those are normal. Those are part of your journey through this. And, essentially I'm helping them connect in ways to see what their strengths are together that's pulling them through this. I mean, this can actually be, it can be the most difficult time in a relationship, but it can make you, just like any challenge can, very, very strong together to walk through this.
When you are a woman in your prime childbearing years and you really want to get pregnant, but you can't, it almost seems like you're hypersensitive, that everybto on TV is pregnant, all of your girlfriends, everything you see.
Yeah, everywhere in Target.
Yeah. How do you, it's very hard to imagine what that's like. And the male, the husband, even if they're supportive, it's still, it's still hard to imagine. How do you help people with that, this idea when people are overly sensitive to the fact that it's seeming everybody else can get pregnant and they can't?
You mean in terms of helping them talk about that, or
helping them talk about that, helping them stay connected as a couple, because it could be very difficult for a husband who is feeling frustration too. Maybe they show it in a different way, but they're just trying to help their wife cope, trying to look at the options. And it might also be tough for the husband, especially if they're experiencing guilt, because as we said before, it could be male factor infertility. It doesn't necessarily have to be, or it could be combined. It could be the husband's fault, even though that's we don't use that word, but he could feel like it's his fault. So how do you keep them on the same page? Because you're absolutely right. There's no way you can go through all this medical intervention, all the cost associated with this type of treatment without really testing the relationship. You got to be on the same page. How do you help them stay together and not come unglued during these kind of predictable roadblocks?
Well, and it's really helping them. It's learning, for me as a therapist working with these clients, is learning how they do communicate. What's the foundation that's already there. And then to me, I almost look at it as you're building an even stronger foundation on top of that. They have to have and agree upon and work together. And a lot of times I'm the person that helps them do that. Really create what I think of as kind of a map for how they walk through this and how they communicate with one another, because it's an issue that, it's never come up before. It's a completely new thing when they're in the beginning stages of this. And even as they're walking through it, new situations will pop up. And a cousin who has a baby shower, and, the wife is in tears. She doesn't want to go. She feels guilty and, self-involved because she doesn't want to go. And the husband kind of doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't want to say anything, but he's not really sure what's going on. Well, they need to talk through some of these scenarios or just some different things that might come up for them and consistently sort of walk through, what do we do when that happens? What do we do when your dad says this? Or when your aunt says, well, you just need to relax. You need to really be a team together and almost practice or have a game plan of some strategies for how to deal with the external things and also the things that go on between the two of you all, where you're not on the same page and you sense that distance. Yes. Who's going to call the other person on it? What's the code word?
So marriage and family therapists like yourself can help a couple, kind of as the way I like to say it, out of the bubble of their own relationship. They're a neutral party that can help them put a game plan together for these very predictable situations. One thing that also seems often that has to be discussed, has to be part of those expectations, are the finances involved with assisted reproductive technology. And you might be a supportive partner, but in your head, you might not want to go to the financial means that some people do to have a chance at having a child naturally. Talk about your kind of experience with that and what people should know about the finances behind trying to get pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of stories and numbers that can go high into 5 or 6 figures depending on how long of a journey people are on. There's different issues with insurance, not being insured. How many cycles do you go through? So imagine, any couple in a relationship is going to have their financial issues. It's a stressor for some people. It's something to constantly negotiate and talk about. So add on top of that a layer of looking at thousands of dollars worth of pharmaceuticals that you have to, wait for on your porch to be delivered because they're frozen and, you paid $800 to have them FedEx. How much longer do we go on with these kinds of things? And where does that money come from? What's being tapped out? Are there other resources? Sometimes in addition to the clinical work with people that I do, I keep my hand in just ongoing research and developments in terms of what's going on in the infertility world. Are there resources out there? I mean, do you go to family? That's another issue to talk about. Do you get a home equity loan? I mean, that's, my son was the product of getting a home equity loan. I mean, we had to make that decision. It was that important to us to do that. And we were in a place where we could do that. So families, I think money's a very intimate issue. And so that gets into a lot of things.
Know, more than sex, more than in-laws, than anything else, couples fight about money. And certainly a highly charged emotional topic like this, or how do we get pregnant? Obviously, it's going to come into play. And one of the things I always do with couples is you talk about it in real clear terms like this. And people are naive. They think it's going to happen the first time, or we're going to the best RE in town. This is his success rate. But you can't plan on it that way. I mean, it has to be, a conversation of expectations. After you get the medical advice, the professional opinion, then you also need someone to give you the relational advice and talk about the expectations of, are we in for this many cycles, we're going to try this long. I mean, that has to be, I think, a deliberate talk kind of couples have. And you're right. There's nothing worse than feeling like you're starting a journey and then your partner is bailing on you before it's over because it's attached to a price tag. But that has to be a conversation you need to have. I am joined in studio this hour. Again, great talk so far by Laura Wagner. We have another half hour to come. And after the break, again, you can join us live in the conversation here on Let's Talk at 571-0970. After the break, though, we're going to talk about how do we know when we're done as far as medical intervention, and how do we move towards adoption or having non-biological children when the drive is strong to have children, but what we have been trying is not working. You're listening to Let's Talk. Dr. Eli's sitting in for Dr. Stan. We'll be right back after the break. Dr. Eli back with you on 970 WGTK. You're part of the Sunday Night Family here on Let's Talk. You're listening to me and Laura Wagner. We're talking about couples struggling with fertility issues. Before the break, Laura, we talked about all the ups and downs, the roller coaster when we're going through assisted reproductive technology. Now, what if that is not working? How do we know we're done in terms of working with an RE, as you said, undergoing fertility treatments, and how do we think about exploring what the next step is? It's not going to happen biologically for us, but the drive to have children is still strong. Where do we go? What do we do?
Yeah, and there are a lot of different factors to go into making that determination. I mean, it's a very individual process, and oftentimes I'll meet people, often my female clients that are going through the process of, how do I know when I'm there? Am I there yet? Is there still more to go on this journey for me to have my own biological child? And I look at it as almost a closure and a grieving process for that part of yourself in your life where you may be, I don't even want to call it closing the door, but sort of shutting down, looking at those options, knowing that you've given of yourself, because you do when you're going through that process, emotionally, physically, financially. And, looking, it's almost an inner core knowing with yourself when you need, some people need to take a break, and some people really get to a place where they know that they have had enough. I mean, my own family, my husband and I had ongoing communication, and he knew I was very tired. I was on these perpetual, I'm pregnant, I'm not pregnant, I'm pregnant, I'm not pregnant. And I had just really, I was exhausted. We were both exhausted from it, me in a different place than he was. And we just talked and said, I think we're done here. So it is a conversation that I think needs to happen between a couple. If a woman decides that and doesn't let her partner in on that, and he's hoping that they'll still, keep going a few more cycles. I mean, those are issues there. So you really have to have some honest discussions about that involve things like finances and numbers, but also just where each person is, with stopping that piece of your journey, going to the doctor and trying to have your biological child together. It means a lot to people. Yeah,
you said a couple of things I want to highlight. First of all, this idea of the emotions, and what if we had to label those emotions that people feel when they stop? What do you help normalize people for? Because that's, again, it's a very private thing. People are listening out there. It's not something, they want to share, so they might not know what's normal to feel when you are at the kind of end of your rope as far as trying these assisted reproductive technologies.
Yeah, I always think of, there's not a whole lot of taboos or things that people don't want to talk about in our culture these days, but infertility is a very hard discussion for people to have, whether you're in it and you're experiencing it or you're on the outside as a family member or a friend. I think some of those emotions, it seems like guilt has come up a lot tonight, but the sense of guilt of, could I have gone on further, or could I go further, and I'm shutting the door, and it could be the next cycle, and it could happen for us. So you go through the what-ifs of that. I think there's a sense of sadness because it's tied into your individuality and that little person that would have come from you all, and what would that mean? And some people go through periods of depression about that. It's a sense of, sadness, and I think a guilt too connected to your partner. Have I given up? Does that mean he feels like or she feels like we've given up, on each other in some sense when you're going through that?
Yeah, I think also you can kind of throw in their failure, the sense that we could not do it, we tried, and this less than woman, less than a man for not being able to produce this a biological child. And I think the other thing that happens is your point. Is you were saying you and your husband, he was reading your cues and he just saw how exhausted you were. And you guys luckily were at the same point at the same time to stop trying. But I think there could also be a lot of anger and resentment if you stop because you're still not ready to stop, but your partner tells you to stop, or finances stop you, or why couldn't you make more money? Why couldn't we go again? Or just resentment at the partner if they're not at the same page. So how do you deal with that? What if, you have made peace with this, you're ready to move forward and exploring other options on how to have a child, but your partner is not there yet? I mean, how do you get them on the same timeline?
Well, and I have worked with a couple where language was actually used on the part of the husband in an IVF cycle. This is it, and we're done. I don't care what you say. This is it, and we're done. So, and this is said in the therapy room. So, it's really, and her grief and that, and her sadness, and the anger, absolutely, that was there. Really working with them to, look at what are all the options here, to say that the finality of this is it, and also just the language of that is, takes them out of the context of that partnership that needs to be there to really walk with each other through this and get through it and make good decisions. Sometimes people maybe need to talk about if it feels like this is it, and for one person and the other person wants to keep going, maybe you need to take a break for a while. Maybe, stop going to see all the doctors, take a break, save some money, save yourselves, and give yourself some time to think about this in a different way and sort of let things settle a bit, and learn how to talk to each other in the interim about what are the next steps while we're in this downtime together, whether it's a month or 3 months or some people 6 months or more. I'm
glad you say that too, because most people feel, oh, it's hurry up. We're out of time anyway. We got to keep going. But sometimes to reset and to take a break to get to that same page, it's not only helpful, you have to do it to be able to make it to the next step. So let's fast forward. Let's say we've gotten both partners on the same page. We've taken the break. We've kind of reset. The drive to have children is still strong, but it cannot happen biologically. Laura, where do we even begin with the adoption process? How do you even start to move forward with that? Because that's something many people, again, never thought they would have to experience. And we talk about taboo. They don't even know where to go. Mm-hmm.
Well, and then you hear a lot of people in the quest for being supportive in your family or your friends, your coworkers say, well, if you decide to share with people that you all are stopping your, infertility process, the fertility treatments, people say, oh, you can always adopt, as though, and I know they're not trying to make it seem like it's the simplest thing. They're trying to offer comfort, but it is another completely different journey, and it has its own twists and turns, just like going through fertility treatment. So, I think the first thing that you have to do if you're in a relationship as a couple is to really talk about what does that mean for you all to be what's now an adoptive family, if you're going to consider that. It's a whole different process to go through. What are each of your expectations for that in terms of, what do we want this child to look like? How old? So those are the things that you really start, some of the questions at the beginning, just to get into.
So we have a couple more segments here on Let's Talk with life coach, marriage and family therapist Laura Wagner. It's Dr. Eli. We're going to come back and walk through the adoption process. How do we move forward with our desire to have a child? Give us a call in the studio, 571-0970. Catch you after the break.
970 WGTK.
Calling Dr. Howard, Dr. Fine, Dr. Frager.
You found Let's Talk with Dr. Stan Frager. Dr. Stan Frager is standing by to give you insight on issues that matter most to you. Call now, 571-0970.
Eli back with you. Dr. Eli Karam with Laura Wagner. She is a life coach and licensed marriage and family therapist. We've been talking all about couples struggling with infertility, now on the road to adoption. We have about 10 minutes left with you on this Sunday night in August. And we're going to give our listeners some really news you can use, some important information. So, Laura, we were talking before the break. Now, a couple, they've finally decided to go down this road. They need information. What do they need to consider? Obviously, a marriage and family therapist, someone like you, is going to be a conduit for that information. What are some important areas that they need to consider as they start on this journey for adoption? What are things they ask themselves? What should they be looking at?
Well, one thing I share with people, just from my own personal knowledge that I tie into my clinical work, is, I tell people as physically involved as infertility treatments were, when you move into the adoption process, there's another kind of scrutiny that comes with that maybe both of you were involved in the infertility process where, it was an issue with the male, female, both of you were in on that, but everybody's involved once you open yourself up to the adoption process. So, I kind of set the stage for people, not to scare them and say your life's going to be turned inside out, but to let them know your life will be looked at in a way that, you can't anticipate. And to go from there, asking people to think about things that they may have had some discussion of, such as, what do we want our family to look like? Did we anticipate having a newborn, an infant? Sometimes at the onset, that can be very important to people, and they're very adamant. But as they find out there are other options and different ways to adopt, different countries, that may change over time. So talking about that, as much as the financials were involved with fertility treatments, what does it mean for you financially, for your family to adopt? How much can you spend? Do you have access to money? Will you save, raise it, borrow it? There's domestic adoption, international adoption. Some involve travel. Some could be right here in your home state. Some people look at foster to adopt. And that's actually a really wonderful option that I think people are kind of scared of, but it can be.
Why do you think people get scared of that? Because the stigma of why a child is taken out of a home?
Exactly. There's that, and there's people think of all sorts of things, that there's reactive, detachment issues and developmental delays and all sorts of things that you can read and research about that may in fact be, part of that process of raising a child if you're foster to adopting. But, what I've learned is that no matter where your child comes from, if it's an infant, and it seems like it's the most pristine situation, that child always has a history. He or she always has somewhere where they came from that just, by virtue of the child being an infant doesn't mean you won't deal with things further. Just like your biological children are different. I mean, it's just, it comes at different stages depending on, where you bring this child into your life. How
do you help a couple get past that unknown? Because you're right. You're taking on, at least some, I guess people would say, well, I know you and I know my genes. We know what we're getting, but we really don't know what we're getting. And that sometimes ambivalence stops people that for otherwise would be great parents, have enough love in their heart to get over. But just this fear of the unknown, especially, if it's a closed adoption, they don't know anything about or little about the birth parents. How do you help couples get over that and take that jump or that leap of faith?
Well, sometimes it's, when they're looking at this situation of, how do we want our family to look like? What kind of, it almost starts to sound to some people, and I think it makes them kind of have that ick factor. It starts to sound like the business of adopting our child because there's stuff transpiring, there's a lot of people involved. But in terms of having conversations together, that for some people, when I work with them, there's a sense of shame around talking about, what if this child has medical issues? Can we take care of that? Is that, something that we can accept and put work into that will be ongoing to really have those conversations that other people may not have? The rest of us that have biological children, who arrives in our life, we go to it and take care of it. With adoption, you're having conversations about, what are our limits with this, or how far are we willing to go, that sort of thing. So you're talking about, some different things that, may enter your life, and you talk about that ambivalence about it. I think when you begin having those conversations and what, I guess for lack of a better way to say it, your criteria are for, what you're both willing to go all in and say, yeah, we could do this. We could do this. We want to do this. This is something we're willing to have as part of our journey, and things that are just, you're not able to do that, and not having shame around that. That's just not how your family is going to look to you, and then moving forward from that.
How do you proceed as far as a support structure? I mean, obviously, if somebody could find a marriage and family therapist like you that has the knowledge and with you the personal experience, that would help. But it almost seems like couples, they take all this stuff you said, they take it on their own, and they're really going to need support from their family, from their friends, and other professionals. What does that look like, the road to adoption, as far as the hurdles up and down, who you surround yourself with, both professionals and personals, to get there?
Yeah, and I think, it begins, I see it as the process of within the relationship of, this is what we think we want to move towards, or if there is ambivalence, discussing it and getting to the place where, adoption seems to be a thing we want to investigate more. A lot of information gathering. I tell people that a lot of resources. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of questions to be asked. There's a ton of information on the internet, but we all know you can't believe everything you read on the internet. In fact, some of it's, just frightening, what the information that's out there and what people will follow as a lead because they so very much want a child. So you have to be really careful and discerning. You have to look for certain licensures, certifications when you get involved with agencies.
Should you talk, some people say, should we talk to a lawyer before we do this? I mean, what do you recommend as far as the type of professionals you should interact with once you start on this journey?
Well, usually when I work with people, I will gauge what sort of route are they thinking they want to go. Once I get an idea, some people will come in and they'll decide, we want a newborn baby and we're looking at a domestic adoption. Okay, well, there's all sorts of adoptions in terms of, you have terms with adoption, just like you do with fertility treatments. It's closed, open, semi-open. Do you want to know the birth parent? Do you want a situation where no one knows anything about anyone? And there's definitely pros and cons to that. I feel there's more cons to that. And do you want to go through an agency where you have a support system of people there that will guide you through every step and you're paying fees along the way? Or do you want to do it more privately and you consult an attorney here in town? And, I have some names of some people that I can connect them to that they can investigate on their own. I walk the line. I don't get into legal things with people because adoption is just an ever-changing world, but people need to know somewhere to start. So kind of give them some different infrastructures to work with in terms of if you go this route, this is sort of the web that you might want to investigate.
I have learned so much, and we were talking about the break. We could easily fill up another hour, a whole nother Sunday night installment talking about fertility and adoption issues, and you are a wealth of knowledge. So let me tell people how they can learn more about Laura Wagner, and again, if you're in the Louisville area, even work with Laura Wagner if you want to. So you want to go to www.laurawagner.com, and that's LAURA-WAGNER, and on there, like I said, I love her website, just the way it's laid out, but you learn, if you haven't already this hour, you learn a lot about Laura the person, which is very important. As far as a fit, you're going to go on this journey with somebody. If you're a couple or an individual, you want to make sure the fit is good. And hopefully you can gauge that by talking to the person on the phone. But even looking at this page, you're going to learn a lot about Laura quickly, Laura, in about a minute or so. What else? What other services you got going on? What else can they find out at when they go to laurawagner.com?
They'll learn where I work. I work for a practice. I work for some wonderful people. Dr. Robert H. Stewart, MD. Dr. Stewart is a psychiatrist, and he, in partnership with his wife, Sherry Stewart, I am employed as a therapist with them. So not only do I work with folks on adoption issues and fertility issues, I see people, individuals, couples, and families for relationship issues, personal issues. And then another facet of my work that I really enjoy, and I do this on my own, and I actually have the luxury of working from my home and doing it, is I have a certification as a life coach. And I think people at different points in their lives may seek therapy, and some seek coaching. This isn't a hard and fast rule that therapy is about healing, but I think a lot of times it is, and sometimes coaching is more about discovery. So those are two different things I do. I'm doing a lot of work right now in coaching around helping people with weight loss.
Great, and I hope they check that out, and I hope you will be back to join us on the Sunday Night Family. As I said, I am a frequent, I feel like the foster child of Stan Frager, and he will be back next week, and I'm in every couple months. It's been great. Next week, great show, talking about getting back to school with Dr. Wyrick, and in the second hour, Dr. Katie Hartman talking about crime, and CEO of Crisis Cleanup. Get a hold of me at www.elikaram.com, Twitter handle Dr. Eli Live, and we will see you next week.